Hello, friends, and welcome in to Rates and Barrels. It is Project Prospect. I am Chris Welsh. There is no DVR, but I am joined by Eno. And today is the Project Prospect. Of course, I would screw it up. I've always screwed it up the entire year. The Project Prospect season finale. This is it. This is the last Project Prospect focused episode we're doing of this season, or at least
we may have some Project Prospect bits and pieces, because we're going to slim down the number of rates and barrels we'll hear in a given week, starting next week. And so therefore, I think Mondays will be Project Prospect / news. We can't not talk about the news of the weekend. And then Fridays will be, some waiver wire action. But as the season ends and we're just looking at the worst waiver wires of all time, then, there's some news, the week's news to be done. So we'll be more of a Monday to Friday from here on out after tomorrow's episode and today's episode. So there'll be Project Prospect. What are they called? What is it called when you do like a segment? We'll do segments, but this will be the last one that's most of the show.
Now, the good thing for me, hopefully good thing for you guys, is that doesn't mean I'm gone, because we are without DVR for a little bit, as he is, being a dad, taking care of that at the back end of the year. So I will be filling in replacement for the next month. So even though this is the last Project Prospect dedicated episode, I will be back again tomorrow with Eno, and then I will be doing the Mondays through October, where we will throw in, some anecdotal note things that are going on, which ironically are going to lead into the Arizona Fall League into October. So that's a little bit of housekeeping for you guys.
I'm coming.
Are you officially? Because I think there was a question if it was going to happen.
No, we answered that question.
Beautiful. So then we get to rate and barrel it up in person, and we get to one of my favorite things.
We should do one.
We can do one. We can absolutely do one. One of my favorite things on the planet, and I've said this for way before Eno and DVR were nice enough to have me on or anything like that, but the time I get to spend with Eno, because you're always a busy guy. Our relationship has definitely grown by doing a show every single week or whatnot, but I didn't want to bug you a whole bunch. And sometimes we might go a full year without talking. But when Eno comes out to first pitch, Eno is a superstar. Just to point out to you guys, he everybody wants his attention. He's the belle of the ball. He is as nice as you could imagine. Listening to him,
just want me for the bag of beer that I always tow,
and he maybe brings in a big old toady bag. Eno is better in person than he is even on the podcast, so that would be one reason to come out. So I always get excited about the weird, unique situations you and I have always caught ourselves in. For whatever reason, like I said, we wouldn't talk for a year, and then all of a sudden you're driving in my car and we're doing a podcast on the freeway for 40 minutes, or you and I are
times we were hanging out. I'm pretty sure you were listening in on an interview that I did with Clint Jackson Frazier, I believe. And I was talking to him about strikeouts. And he said famously, I just let it eat.
I just let it. One of my, my two favorite memories, I kind of vaguely remember that one. One of them was talking to you after you had just talked to Brett Phillips, and Brett Phillips told you, he was just like, I just want to be a number 7 on a team. And you're like, what?
I think he said 9 hitter. And I was like, dude, you're in the National League. They still had they didn't have DHs at the time. It was
that was one of my favorites. And then also sitting in on talking when you did an interview with Michael Chavis, and I was kind of sitting in there, and that's always been the thing. I kind of float around. You and I would talk. It's a bunch of cool stuff. Yeah, exactly. Catch up on the field, do interviews, talk about players, talk through them. That's a fun thing. And now we're doing the podcast together. So I have had a great time doing Project Prospect with you, as somebody who I get to kind of do an in-person Project Prospect with when you are out here in Arizona for first pitch.
We had a spirited debate about JB Bukauskas, I think.
Yeah, that was the other one. I was going to tell you, actually, one of my favorite things. This is like a digging prospect one. It was you, myself, and James Anderson. We went away. This was at the Scottsdale Stadium. And if you've ever been there, they've got this big like porch out in right field. And that's where the first pitch party was, and people getting the drinks and stuff. And you, James, and myself, we kind of made our way over to sitting behind home plate, and we were watching JB Bukauskas. And what I was asking you, and the question still holds, was I was like, what type of data have we seen on sub 6 foot pitchers being successful in the major league? Because that was the thing about Bukauskas, was a huge prospect at the time with the Astros, but it was like, yes, you have a great slider. Yes, you got a good fastball at that time. But what was the success rate of these rather shorter pitchers? And you were kind of espousing about that. Has anything changed? Are we still in kind of a, you're under 6 foot, you're going to have a really tough time being a starting pitcher, right?
Well, I don't know. I found when I looked at major leaguers, I found no relationship between height and outcomes. But that's not quite the question you asked. You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah.
There are short pitchers that make it to the big leagues and are successful. You know, like Marcus Stroman is a shorter pitcher and he's successful.
Yes, one.
But and so that screws up any sort of correlations you're trying to do, right? You're like, you know, is there a correlation between height and success? Height and I did height and success, height and like career WAR, height and fastball velo, height and strikeouts, height and strikeout rate. I found no correlations, right, between those things. But that has a real big portion of survivor bias to it. It's like, you know, those are the ones who succeeded. How about all the people who didn't succeed? And there is a piece of evidence that there is a sort of not minimum height, but that height helps you perhaps become a big leaguer, in that major league pitchers are like average 6'2", I think.
Well, that was kind of my point I was about to say, is like
they average over 6 feet, and that's not the general population averages under 6 feet. So like there is something there where, like, you know, the major league pitchers are taller.
I mean, and that's kind of my point, is like, you can point to Marcus Stroman, but how many other pitchers can you point to that are under 6 feet tall that are starting pitchers? It's a dumb thing, by the way, because it falls in line along the lines you would think of, like the same thing where you look at a guy like Jose Altuve and you're like, well, that guy's 5'4" or whatever, you know, like he can't play, but they can. But in baseball, there is some weird correlation that kind of floats around of how many are those. And I remember we talked about that with Davy Garcia, who used to be a Yankees prospect, who's now with the White Sox. And it's like, whatever that weird thing is about the holdup, maybe it's zone, whatever it is, you just, I can't think of sub 6 foot starting pitchers, not relief pitchers, starting pitchers in Major League Baseball. And as you said, I think the average male is 5'8". If the average height of a starting pitcher is 6'1" or 6'2", there's a discrepancy there. So I don't know what that is. And that it's a debate we can continue. Maybe we can have it again at First Pitch. Maybe that could be I would love to have a panel on that. I want to find out about it. But that was what you, James, and I were talking about. And guess what? JB Bukauskas is a journeyman reliever at this point. He's not a starting pitcher. So it did kind of self-answer itself. You look like you're trying to find some heightism things for me. Are you finding some heightism for pitchers?
I just doing a quick baseball reference search for people under 5'11". But
okay, while you're doing that, I'll set up here. So in this final one, we actually do have it's kind of be similar to what we're going to be doing in the other episodes. We're going to be talking about a few of the news. How high? How tall is Fromber?
How high is Fromber? That is a good
How
question.
high?
He's 5'11". Sonny Gray.
Okay.
5'10".
Okay.
Sonny Gray is should have won. Tim Lincecum.
That's a good one.
Obvious one. Tim Lincecum was a short guy. Pedro Martinez was a short guy. Yeah. But if you want pitchers under 6 feet, I don't know. There's some criteria here that in terms of qualified pitchers, maybe it's qualified pitchers or something. But it's only showing Fromber and Sonny Gray for like the last 3 years.
So, I mean, I just want to point out, like, there's a correlation.
That's two guys.
Yeah, that's not good. That's not good. And kind of different guys, I would say as well. I was going to say, like, if you could find sub 6 foot with like big fastballs or something like that, but I wouldn't put that on Fromber, maybe more on Sonny Gray, but there is still some correlation there. But it also would be probably about finding who those pitchers are in the minor leagues to even have that conversation about. At that time, it was Bukauskas and Davy Garcia came up, but we don't have a whole bunch of those, but those are the weird things that end up happening when you get a whole bunch of baseball people together. I tend to ask weird questions, and then we get, weird, crazy analysis, and then it ends later at the night with drinking some beers that Eno brought. That's what's so great about First Pitch and hanging out with you. So on the episode, we actually have a couple bigger major league pieces of news, some not so prospect news, one of which is a fantastic article that Eno has got on The Athletic right now about Cole Ragans, which I want to talk about. Some prospects in the majors, some top prospects that are going big, and that's kind of if we get to it. Also very interested in how the MLB draft prospects have been producing, because there's been high-level production that these guys have moved up. So we've got a smorgasbord of prospect things to talk about here, and maybe we'll have some more heightism and how high is pitcher. We can get some more hard-hitting analysis like that. The two big baseball pieces I just wanted to point out, one of which I thought was really interesting. Shohei Ohtani's agent came out and said that they 100% plan for Ohtani to still be a two-way player. And I believe he's also going for some testing today as we're recording this. So that, wonder if that testing has anything to do with them also waiving 6 of their major leaguers, and what is he out here playing for. The other little piece, they did note that at some point, Ohtani is going to have some type of procedure. That's what they said. So at some point, there's some type of procedure. This is really great news. I'm just curious if there has been any more chatter into your world about this idea, especially if Ohtani is committed to being two-way, whether it is from teams or players or scout or whatever it is. I'm just curious, really your thoughts on him continuing to be a two-way player as we're getting word.
One of the revelations from the agent was that this tear is in a completely different place. It's not in the place that was repaired last time, and it is closer to the elbow. I don't know why that's good, but he seemed to think that was good. And I guess it's good that it wasn't the graft itself, so that's holding. But now I'm reading between the lines. Now I'm speculating. What I'm speculating on is the fact that he continues to play and talks about being ready for the bell in 2024. That's something his agent said. So that's something. Those are facts, that he continues to play and that his agent thinks he can be ready for the beginning of next season. The only procedure that I can think of that may line up with these two things is an internal brace. And that is something that sometimes has like a 6-month timetable, in which case he would not be necessarily pitching to begin 2024, but he could rehab pretty quickly from that and be hitting to begin 2024.
Did you believe when he said that they were implying that he would be ready to pitch next year, or you just
no? I'm trying to connect the dots, because agents are it's kind of double speaky, and like he's gonna be ready for the bell in 2024. Well, yeah, as a pitcher or as a hitter, or, he's gonna be a two-way pitcher, two-way player. Yeah, but to begin 2024 or later, he kind of like skirted along. So my understanding of this is he will pitch. He may not pitch at all next season. It may be a full Tommy John, but the way he was talking about those tears and stuff, I'm speculating that there might be a room for an internal brace, which has a shorter recovery period and may allow him to hit while he's recovering. And we could talk about maybe a half season or 2/3 of a season pitching next year, because if he got it October 1, November, December, January, February, he starts hitting 4 months in. I think 4 months into a 6-month process, you're hitting. If they're saying he can hit now without affecting it, I think he can hit 4 months in. So then you start hitting March, April. Then you start your sort of pitching rehab process, which is he going to do that on the side, or is he going to go back down? It's going to depend on his new organization, but maybe 2 months into the season, he's pitching again if it's an internal brace. So, and how are they going to use him? Is the new team going to say, we want you, more bulkish, we want you more of this, we want you more of that. The new team is going to have some say in all this. And maybe that's part of the process too, is like wanting to get to the postseason and start talking to teams about what they want them to do. because
I'm
if
smirking.
you're going to give me 500 million, then like, yeah, you guys can tell us what surgery you want us to take.
I'm also smirking at the implication that you just affirmatively have said like new team, because one of the things that well, with the injury, I kind of was loudly saying like, hey, listen, this was the one scenario where I thought Ohtani could return to the Angels because of this injury and what might happen with the market, and people kind of playing like, oh, the pitching thing's not going to change. He'll get his money. And it's like, well, you know what? Teams might still be apprehensive of $500 million on a player.
What if he does a 1-year pillow contract? That was a question to the agent.
That was
which he did not like.
Yeah, well, that's what I thought could happen. Or like, he gets but he gets a big contract from the Angels, and then there's an out after 2 years or whatever, so he has time to blah blah blah. But then with the team
out, like maybe there's like maybe there's certain vesting situations or something.
Yeah, that was something I thought. But then when they like waived all the players, the team's embarrassing. And then they publicly said, like, we told Ohtani he should get checked. And they said no. Like, those are all bad things that ended up happening. There also is a side implication that he could also not do anything. Like with this recovery, he could do slow recovery. He could not have any surgery even into this offseason, sign his contract when he's with a new team. We're committed to hit, and then let's see where this goes into the next offseason. And then he has one of the, so there's also the potential that they could kick this can down the road if they so choose, and they, have him kind of be a hitter with a pitcher into the future. But something to watch.
Yeah. On the 3-0 show, Britt had talked to people who know these sort of things, and they said that the location of the arm that this is on and the fact that he hits left-handed does fall into the equation, that he is probably not risking his further tear in the elbow, because of the way the back elbow moves. He's a back elbow? There's a front elbow. He's hitting left-handed. It says front elbow. The way the front elbow moves in a swing does not put him at further risk. So he's not risking anything further by hitting.
But if they do these testing and he does do what you are saying, if he were to have that surgery now in the beginning of September, you could actually probably start hitting into January, sometime in January.
Right.
You could start hitting if you did it now. So
yeah, there's some Angels home run records that his agent was asked about. There's some proof of concept, like I'm one of the best hitters. I wouldn't be surprised if he comes out of this testing today and he's done for the season.
Yeah, I wouldn't either.
It could happen at any moment.
And then you could be good to go for the season. Other piece of news, it's nasty news, and it's also maybe about a pitcher that won't pitch in 2014 or maybe ever again. Julio Urias was arrested on a felony domestic violence charge, and this is his second charge of this. And it doesn't look good. It does not look good. I haven't seen a whole lot of details on it. Eno, you and I were kind of looking. The previous one was not a great situation. He was suspended for 20 games. This one is going to hold much bigger weight, though we just don't really have details on it. And this is probably minimally, if you want to really get like down to it, this could minimally half a year, maybe normalized a full year. And a bigger thing, which is being kind of talked loudly about, is maybe ever again. So I don't know if you have any thoughts, but we're not going to see Julio Urias for significance of 2024, most likely after this latest charge.
Yeah, this is really disconcerting. Also, some of the particulars are not great at all, because when he got in trouble in 2019, he was suspended 20 games for something that was, according to witnesses, the pitcher shoved his girlfriend to the ground in a shopping mall parking lot. And his statement at the time, and this is a quote that he released through the MLBPA, even in this instance where there was no injury or history of violence, I understand and agree that MLB players should be held to a higher standard. Now we have a history of violence, and the longest suspensions under this policy so far: Trevor Bauer for 194, Sam Dyson for 162, Jose Torres for 100, Carlos Martinez 85, Odubel Herrera 85, Hector Oliveira 82, Domingo Germán 81, and Jimmy Cordero 76. So I think he's going to slot in there somewhere.
Well, this is also the second instance. I think Germán's like the first instance of like a felony domestic violence charge, and it was 80 games. You have a history of it now. I can't imagine this is less than a year, but also I'm done with the Dodgers. I mean, the Dodgers are any team would be outside of the Yankees. I hate to say it. Like, what teams have stuck by these players in these instances? I can't imagine. They didn't do it with Bauer.
Well,
It'd be a bad precedent
free
to do it with
agency.
Urias.
It's through free agency, and that's been part of it too. You know, even for the Yankees, it's been like, well, you know, he's still under contract. He says he's going to get better. Obviously, there were some other issues there with the drinking. So, you know, maybe there was some stuff that we haven't seen where they're trying to help him get sober or this or that, you know, like trying to actually help the player. That's still with the organization. In this case, you've got this free agency situation for Urias that's just going to leave him out there, in which case he's a little bit more like Trevor Bauer, who all the teams declined to sign as a free agent, you know, and so I think you may have that same thing for Urias. You know, I don't necessarily want to speculate or comment on, you know, who is more likely to be able to come back from that. But I would assume that the precedent is here that Urias is going to be over 85 games.
I would also assume. Yeah, I would.
I don't know if he gets all the way to Sam Dyson's 162. There was like for Sam Dyson, I guess there was sort of some documentation that had been going on for a while. In this case, though, you still kind of have that documentation, right? You have like, you know, 2 incidents over a certain period of time. I don't know if you can assume that it's been going on the whole time throughout, but in any case, I would think it's somewhere between 100 and 162. I know that's a pretty wide gap, but that does take him out of this year. It takes him out of, I would say, most of next year, and it leaves him as a free agent in the middle of a suspension. So it's not good news.
No, and as more things come to light, it'll probably speak to the severity of, you know, if there's not other documented, it will speak to the bigger source of where this is going to go, and it doesn't look good no matter what. Let's turn it over. We're turning it over to the project prospect side of this in our finale. And this guy came into the season as a prospect. This is a not necessarily so much prospect eligible player now, but I want to talk about it because this is the not so prospect. You put this article together, and this is going to be one of the most talked about players in this offseason. I'm fine with however much we want to cover on this. I got other stuff, but we can kind of plow through it. Cole Ragans has been the talk of fantasy baseball, league winner. I picked him up. This is amazing. I picked him up freely in a Dynasty league earlier this year, 16 team, just floating out there.
I did pick him up in Devil's Rejects.
And I'm going to be walking into next year with him. Cole Ragans' most recent start, 6 innings, 1 hit, 7 Ks, even more amazing, 22 swing and whiffs. And I went and calculated 2 hard hit balls, both under 100. So no ball hit over 100 in this most recent start. And you have pinned or typed, however you want to say it, an article over on The Athletic, which you guys can check out. You should right now, about Cole Ragans and how he became the flamethrower that he is. So there's a couple things in this. There's where this is going to lead to, but I'd love to hear your conversation with Ragans and what led to this. And let's get a breakdown from this article on Cole Ragans, the new Cole Ragans that we're seeing.
Well, it's a really fun article because I got led into the process on both sides, and it's a unique opportunity because if it was his pitching coach for the Rangers or for the Royals that had done most of the heavy lifting, I don't know if they would have told me everything they did. But the real thing that Cole Ragans did was he went to Tread, which is Tread Athletics is one of these shops like a Driveline where they do player development for pitchers outside of the regular sort of team structure. And he went to Tread and he started working with Tyler Zombro. And Tyler Zombro is a really interesting character who is still trying to pitch in the big leagues, but is also coaching and knows what it's like to overcome injury and persevere, because he was hit in the face by like a 98-mile-an-hour hit. And there's a great story by Brit Giroli about his own story. coming back. And so Cole Ragans' story starts with the fact that he had Tommy John and then he tore it on the last rehab start. Coming back from the Tommy John, he had to have a second Tommy John. So he never made it back. And, I don't want to give away the whole piece, but one of the real interesting things for me was that Tyler said that the fact that he rehabbed for so long, and it was like 2 straight years of rehabbing, actually led to some problems. And if you think about it, that's not surprising, because what do they do in rehab from Tommy John? One of the things is they tell you, stop throwing your hard breaking ball. Well, that's something that you do to strike batters out. So how long are you going to, like, what if you took 2 years off of throwing a slider? You might not come back with the slider. That's what happened with Cole Ragans. Another thing that they do in rehab is, like, don't go all out. We don't want you to throw like competitive. We're not at a competitive stage yet. We want you to kind of, throw free and easy, or whatever that is. Well, there's a difference in your mechanics when you throw 98 than when you throw 88 or whatever, right? And so if you rehab for 2 years, you're kind of building your body to throw 88, throw change ups, and, not stress the body or whatever. You know what I mean? And so he rehabbed for so long that it affected his top end velo. It affected his hard breaking ball. And the process coming back was had to do with these little exercises kind of called plyometrics, which are just ways to activate small muscles in your body. So he did a bunch of that. And we talked about the specifics of that with Tyler and with Cole. And then he went on a weighted ball program for the first time in his life, and he's a devotee to that now. He throws weighted balls every day. And then the last bit that was really interesting was that he noticed that when he comes to camp with Texas, and he's already throwing 98, 99 in spring, and everyone's like, "Whoa, that's new." But he's not throwing the slider. And he gets traded to the Royals, possibly because he'd already had 2 Tommy Johns. So there's some aspect of like, well, he's throwing 99 now, and like he's already had 2 Tommy Johns. Like, I don't want to be there when it breaks again, So that might have been the rationale behind the Texas trading for Aroldis Chapman. But his first start in Omaha, I think he had 1 or 2 starts in Omaha, and lefties were going nuts on him, and he was like, "I'm a lefty. Why are lefties going nuts on me?" And he realized, I'm throwing a cutter to lefties, and all they're doing is, it's not enough separation off the fastball. All they're doing is sort of shooting it the other way, like micro adjusting. He said they're micro adjusting their barrel and just, making contact with it. And so he went back to Tyler, and they looked at Stuff Plus. They looked at a Stuff Plus map and were like, where's the best slider for me? And he was like, oh, it's here. And so he identified a movement pattern he wanted, a velo he wanted, and now he throws an 88-mile-an-hour gyro slider that pulls the whole package together. And that's now 88-mile-an-hour gyro slider, 83-mile-an-hour curveball, mid-80s changeup that got good while he was rehabbing, and now a fastball that in his last start he was sitting 97 plus. And this is sitting, this is crazy, because he was sitting 92-1 last year. And that's just a huge increase.
A couple things here. One on that slider, by the way, he's now throwing it almost 10% of the time. If we round up, he has got a 5-pitch mix that is being used 10% of the time. That's a wild mix. Also, it is the highest whiff percentage of any of his pitches. 46.7% whiff percentage right now. Every single one of his pitches, by the way, have a 20 or higher whiff percentage, and the lowest batting average against, or expected batting average against, is that slider right now. So that's been a game changer. I asked you this off air, and I'm going to just bring it here again. What I can't understand, because we're going to ask the big question that has been alluded to online. We're going to do that here in a second. But what I can't understand, and I was trying to figure out, and when someone smarter can tell me, but when you told me that Cole Ragans had never done a weighted ball program before, I just was like, why? Like, why? Like, I don't understand why minor league systems have so much of a hands-off approach in so many ways to prospects that it will blow your mind. you listening, and it blows my mind sometimes because we think of these organizations and we think of baseball in general, and we look at major leagues and we look at analytics, and you hear Eno talk and you hear the smartness that comes from baseball. But then when you dig down to it, the amount of hands off that happens with prospects at sometimes every level is astonishing to me. And the wasted talent and the missed opportunities of wasted talent shine in this thing right here. How if there's a proven track record, maybe it's just so new, teams haven't adjusted to it, that a thing like weighted
balls aren't that new anymore, you know?
Okay, but that's my thing. If you know that this can unlock stuff, how do you get to a point where this guy had never done it in his life, hits the majors, and then major leagues like, okay, now let's kind of take a look at this and let's do this. I just don't see why teams don't implement more of the things they do at the major league level to the minor league level. And I can't personally understand or listen to resources as being a reason behind it. I'm not going to buy it.
It's not resources.
But is it bad for you? You tell me. Like,
it's complicated? I mean, the Giants here locally have made a strategy out of getting guys that have never done weighted balls. So Alex Wood, Alex Cobb, and Sean Manaea all picked up weighted balls the offseason they signed with either the offseason they signed with or just before they signed with the Giants. So I think the Giants have identified this as a possible source of upside on the free agent market with veterans even. But with veterans, I almost understand it more because even though it's not new, weighted balls weren't necessarily around when they were coming up, you know, like a guy like Alex Cobb, you know, like it's not super surprising to me that he hadn't done weighted balls because when he was a kid, like they weren't as much of a thing, right? So that doesn't surprise me. But, you know, Cole Ragans is more of a kid. He's a guy who's come up through the weighted ball era, you know, and you would have expected that somebody had offered to him. And the other thing I can say is the player has some agency in this. The player has some autonomy. And so I don't think that, you know, you don't like, especially with something like weighted balls, there are some people out there who thinks that it leads to injury. There are some studies. I think they're poorly done studies, but there are some studies that sort of point to that.
And that's what I was kind of leading to. I was curious, was there some injury thing that would, I mean,
right.
I guess
so I think as an organization, you don't necessarily want to be like, you know, hey, let's all do this thing that some people think leads to injury. Right. And you definitely don't want to do that without giving the player some choice then. Right. So then you'll have some players who will be at an organization that, you know, most of people are throwing weighted balls, but this player says, no, I think that leads to injury. I'm not going to do that. And you as a player development machine have to leave room for that. You have to be like, cool, like this is all choice, you know, like we think it's a good idea, but cool. And Cole himself said that in this process, someone had turned him on. He said somebody in Minnesota. I don't know who it is. I should have asked him, but he said somebody in Minnesota, his friend of his in Minnesota had been working at Tread. And he said he got on a phone call with Tread and 15 minutes later, he was like, yeah, I'm all in. And part of that was weighted balls. So, you know, to some extent, there is a failure of maybe communication with Cole. It's like, you know, maybe somebody in the Texas organization sort of sat down with Cole and been like, here's a plan that I think could really work, you know, blah, 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 including weighted balls. And this is why these things are going to work for you. And it seems like nobody really convinced Cole of that before.
I will tell you, it seems like there are more stories of players improving themselves outside of organizations than there are of players finding themselves in organizations. Maybe it's recency. Maybe I'm not thinking of it. I feel like the Rays, you actually hear of a lot of internal stuff, but the amount of times I hear you hear a player talk about Driveline or, you know, Lars doing the weighted, you know, the weighted vests and it's astonishing to me that teams are okay with these players finding themselves outside of their own organization and not looking at themselves.
They're okay with free player development help.
Sure. No, but to me, I would be like, there's got to be something internally wrong with how we are approaching our system, that we can't do these with players, that we cannot identify these things. And I think that's a failure in the system, but it's kind of beside the point.
I think it may have something to do with media to some extent. So you heard me say that, you know, I got this ability to, you know, look inside the training process because he worked at Tread, right? So, I'm more likely to write about this if I get full access to the coach and what their methods are, and get to show some of that and show video. Like I have video in there of him doing these exercises. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think that if he did all this with the Rangers, they'd be like, here's video of him doing the exercise we did to improve him. Because there was this cloak and dagger, we don't want everybody to know what we're doing, Whereas the outside organization is like, yeah, we want everybody to know what we're doing, because there's going to be some pitcher who reads this who says, I'm going to sign up with Tread. It's free advertising for them. So there is something about how the media interacts with teams, and how they interact with these shops like Driveline and Tread that may lead to that sort of idea. I would think that there's lots of successes. I think of things like the Astros pitching staff, the way the Dodgers keep just turning out young pitchers and trading them away and turning out new ones. Even the way
you're right.
Even the way that I think that the Marlins are really good at turning out starting pitching, and they all throw this crazy hard changeup, and, they all have interesting fastballs, and, there's something in common, and they're not all high draft picks. Some were traded, some were picked, some were signed internationally, and they do a good job with all of them. So, there are definitely successes inside teams, but
and
you're right
ironically
also that I think teams should be a little bit more systematic about player development, and should, at least have a weighted ball station at every so they don't, these players a lot of times have to buy their own weighted balls. It's the weirdest thing. I was just there. I saw a player be like, hey, my new balls are in, and then it was like, oh, let me touch your balls, and there was this whole thing, but that guy had to buy his own, and that's a little weird. I think if I was running an organization, I'd be much more likely to be like, that's the weighted ball station. You guys have no money. I'm not going to make you pay for your own weighted balls. We've got the weighted ball station over there with the wall, the plyo wall, and all the stuff you need to do. And we have internal programs that you can access for weighted balls. And if you ask us, we will help you with the arm care thing with weighted balls, or we'll even suggest it to you, because it's right over there, and it's part of the system. And I don't think that every team is like that.
I would treat it like a gym. Why not have every piece of equipment?
Yeah, exactly.
Be like, well, if you want to do dumbbells, you're gonna have to bring your own dumbbells in, but we do have a bench press. What? What are you talking about? Yeah, that's how I would be.
My own dumbbells.
We have a treadmill, but we don't have an elliptical. So you do. Also, what's so funny about that organization? Those two organizations, by the way, the Royals and Rangers, they've built apartment complexes right outside their spring training complex that I live next to. They invested they invest
really
money.
That's a really good thing.
It's an amazing thing that they have housing for and it's high class facilities that are just right outside. It's actually overlooks the Rangers backfield, and it's two big buildings next to each other. There's security. They do awesome stuff. And it's but why not just have all of the things out there? All right. So all that aside, I'm kind of pontificating about that. Here's the biggest question. And this is what everybody has already asked, and we already know the articles are coming. How do you identify the next Cole Ragans? And you and I were kind of trying to figure that out. That's going to be an article probably written a lot of times in the offseason by a lot of different voices.
I think it's impossible. I mean, one aspect that's really impossible is knowing who out there hasn't done weighted balls and has just waiting for an increase in VO. We were joking, if Dane Dunning came back next year and was throwing 93, I would like him a lot more.
Yeah.
So
I want to ask him, is he doing a weighted ball program? I guess he's not. He's a Ranger. So
now I just have to do a survey where I just go through, hey, weighted ball? Nope. Hey, weighted ball? Nope. Weighted ball. I wonder how quickly a team would try to shut me down from doing that, or tell their players not to answer me or something.
We should find out. Actually, that would be a great experiment.
I just went into the clubhouse. I was like, hey, I just need to know yes or no. Weighted balls. They just
you should bring one in and be like, do you know what this is? Do you know what this is?
Right. Yeah. I would wager that I might not even finish that media session without a PR guy being like, what are you doing?
Really? That's so weird. So you and I were toying around a little bit. So that's the hard part, is if you want to take Cole Ragans, one of the biggest pieces is the weighted ball stuff. How do we know that? So how are we going to know that? But then what I threw out to you is is the idea of the next Cole Ragans just looking for big velo up? Is it as simple as trying to identify guys that have had big fastball velocity, which is kind of such a simplistic thing we look at? Maybe it is, but also part of the slider conversation we had earlier. We have seen a lot of success with added sliders. So do you think those are the two?
I mean, the added slider, I think, is a little bit easier to look for. I mean, one of the things that I did that was just really simple was put up a Fangraphs leaderboard. Starting pitchers this year have thrown at least 10 innings. And then I sorted by slider pitch type value. And that's just an easy way to be like, who doesn't have a slider who's pitched this year? And there's people that I'm not like Jose Quintana, like, okay, whatever. James Paxton has a cutter that's basically a slider. So I'm not really that they're not, none of those guys are the next Cole Ragans, obviously. But I think that the cutter slider thing is interesting. But one name that's I think a little bit more of a shot in the dark, but I was joking around. My kid is a Padres fan now, the eldest, and I was telling him that next year the Padres under contract, and there's some weird contracts that could be extended or options picked up, but really like lock solid under contract, they only have Joe Musgrove and possibly an injured Yu Darvish. And my kids said, "Well, they have Pedro Vila," and I said, "Yes, they have Pedro Vila." Pedro Vila does not throw a slider. And finding a slider for him, I think, would be pretty good. Just a hard pitch, because he like Cole Ragans throws a curveball and a changeup. So it's having a hard pitch that looks like his fastball could be good. A pitcher that I like better that doesn't throw a slider and does throw a cutter is Taj Bradley, and there's no surety that this cutter is the cutter that is going to make everything work. He's talked about how he wants to throw that thing harder. Part of the reason he was sent down to the minor leagues before was to throw the cutter harder. And once he threw the cutter harder, he was back up. So he's obviously, fiddling around with that. So maybe there's something that doesn't go 89, but has more depth that would work for him. He's just a work in progress where he's got a great fastball. Maybe reminds me a little bit of a young Taijuan Walker, because he's got the great fastball and he's just trying to figure out some secondary stuff that goes with it. And maybe that would be a slider. But I don't, at this point, everyone knows it's a slider league, and most people come to the major leagues with a good slider.
Yeah. And we were also looking at, potential relief pitchers that maybe could. I mean, it's a really tough thing, because the thing about Cole Ragans is he was just put into like 1-2 inning outings pretty much his entire Ranger time this year, and then he was unleashed with the Royals. So then it's like, do you go and look at relief pitchers that maybe could get stretched out if a team wanted to? The two that jumped out to me when we were doing it, but I don't know if either one can get out of it. But when we were looking at the 30-day marker for four-seam velo, I don't know, Carlos Hernandez just jumped out to me. He's throwing 99.6. That was the fastball, and that's a guy who had been a starter in the past with the Royals, but they've also traded away, and he most likely is probably just the closer in the future. But he kind of stood out to me. And then, you can't help it, but you want to talk about a guy that used to be a top pitching prospect as a starter, who's putting up big velo, at least in the majors, is just Nate Pearson. But my problem with Nate Pearson, as I told you, I remember talking to Nate Pearson in like the AFL in like 2018. And he was like, I just went to Driveline, and it's like, so that guy's probably done everything. He's already been out there. So
right.
I don't know what would
definitely
change.
No velo increase, and he's definitely had his pitches shaped. It's more just for him about staying healthy, and that may lead to being just in the bullpen. But
yeah. So the identifier for you in the offseason is going to be fastball, additional sliders, and then maybe, as you had said to me as well, maybe tracking fastball increases in spring training is more important than it's been before, because that might be the starter kit of identifying these guys that could break out. When we actually get velo numbers is going to be in spring training.
Yeah. So I tend to think, like, I think one reason why when we study fastball increases in spring training and we find that it's pretty noisy is that we have these things where, we have pitchers who are starting pitchers who throw 1 inning their first time out and like, oh my gosh, their velo's up, but it's not because they just threw 1 inning. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then we're also reporting all these increases of like, oh, this guy's up 0.7. And you're like, okay, yay. So I tend to think that maybe if we did a study where we looked just at large increases in velo and large decreases, we would find more signal. And you would have found that with Cole Ragans because he came in maxing at 99 and before he'd maxed at 95. So something like that should turn our heads for sure. Another thing that I think you could say, and this wasn't 100% the case with Cole Ragans, but we had to read between the lines a little bit. And so I would think that hearing that a player was or seeing that a player is switching organizations, like a young player, that another team had been like, hey, there's a reason we're picking this guy up. You know what I mean? We're trading for this guy. Like, I think a little bit of like taking Oviedo from the Cardinals, right? You take Oviedo from the Cardinals. Cardinals don't have a huge, like a great reputation for developing strikeout pitchers in particular, or pitchers in general recently. And you take him from St. Louis, where he's averaging 94.9, and in Pittsburgh he's averaging 96 plus, right? And maybe he was put on a weighted ball program. You know what I'm saying? And maybe this was the first time he ever done it because he didn't do it with St. Louis, who not necessarily that kind of a program in terms of weighted balls, data, and tech. So, I think changing. So just generally, these are things that we've heard before, and they're not satisfying because it's not like a magic bullet for Cole Ragans, but changing organizations, adding a slider, adding velo.
Yeah, it's not satisfying because it's for most people they can't
forever.
Yeah, but they can't go to like Baseball Savant and look at a couple stats and be like, "Oh, that's the guy." That's why it's probably going to be less satisfying.
I can't sort for hasn't done weighted balls or like needs a slider badly.
Yeah, sort for breakout incoming. So you just can't quite do that.
I guess you could look for people with weird reverse splits. You could look for weird reverse splits because that's what Cole led Cole to get the slider.
Oh, that isn't. Yeah, that's actually kind of a sneaky one you could do. So yeah, take a look at that. Some other prospect stuff that very good. Go check out the article, by the way, if you haven't. I think it's $1 a month right now. Athletic.com/rates and barrels. You can sign up. You can get access to that article. You can read through all of it, which I highly suggest you do. And in the off season, is always going to have great stuff. I had a few other like not so prospects anymore. Just want to get your take on a few of these players, and then we'll see what we can get you through the rest. Our boy Mason Miller, I wanted to get your take, has been back since August 16th. He's had 5 appearances. His most recent, he went to 3, which is tied for the most. He has been pretty phenomenal since he's come back. He's had 1 game where he got hit up. He has not given up a hit in his last 2 starts. And as a matter of fact, of the 5, he's only given up hits in 2 of the last 5. Velo is up, but the innings are just not there. Strikeouts, phenomenal. I mean, he just looks like that big power pitcher that's out there, but he is still rehabbing and still not going deep. So any thoughts on Mason Miller through the end of this year and, kind of stepping into next year?
I'm trying to do something here real quickly. 103, 145. So he's faced 145 batters in the minor leagues, and he has 14, 27. He has 69 strikeouts. Wait, what is that? That's just bonkers, dude.
That's like
69 over 145.
38%.
48% strikeout rate, dude.
Wow, yeah, you're right. Yeah. That's ridiculous.
48, dude. Right now in AAA it's 55. I mean, it's all tiny samples, so it's kind of ridiculous. But if you add it all up, you get 48. That is amazing. I mean, he's Nate Pearson West, maybe.
Is Mason Miller the next Cole Ragans?
Is Mason Miller the next Nate Pearson? I mean, I don't think it counts. No, because he already had the velo. he's just the next. Is there a guy that was often injured in the minors and then just kind of
Hunter Green
like made it work?
Hunter Green had a big, huge fastball, implemented the slider later. He was injured for the first 2 years. And then, when he came to the majors and he threw that 30% slider last year, he looked like a completely new pitcher. So Kopech, I'm also thinking of like high velo pitchers is what I'm thinking of. Those two are kind of similar. But it's Walker Buehler had
mark early on like even Cole Ragans, like in terms of like dynasty value, Cole Ragans and Mason Miller, they're exciting, but the health is a major mark on them. I mean, it's just.
Who would you rather have, Ragans or Miller dynasty?
Ragans put up more bulk, man. I mean, we're gonna get through all the season being excited about Mason Miller, and right now he has 39 innings on the season.
That's not good.
It's nothing.
Yeah, it's not. So you go Ragans over Miller.
I think so. I mean, when's the next time I could expect 150 innings from Mason Miller?
Will it ever happen?
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, no, I agree with you on this. I agree with you. Like I couldn't get over like that he had 30 minor league innings and then he was coming up to the majors and everyone's like, Mason Miller's like the #1 guy. And it's like, I don't know. And then he got hurt and they're still not stretched out. I just don't know what this is. I don't know what he is. And Cole Ragans is a short sample size, but it's elite. It's an elite in a short sample size.
He's going to put together more innings this year than Mason Miller's ever put together in pro ball. Yeah, he's going to throw more innings this year than Mason Miller has thrown in pro ball.
Is Mason Miller going to be a closer at some point, or is he going to stick as a starting pitcher in your mind?
I mean, that's the one nice thing is that, if Ragans gets injured and he comes back and he's not throwing as hard, is he necessarily a closer? Or, the backup plan for Ragans is probably not as the floor is probably lower, because I do think that the worst case scenario for Mason Miller is he's the lights out closer.
Which would be a great one.
That's the kind of stuff he has.
Yeah. A couple hitters, and you can pick a who'd you rather for Dynasty. Royce Lewis, 2 straight 3-hit games, 3 grand slams in 8 games. He has been on an absolute freaking tear. This is a not so prospect, but he's healthy right now.
Pushing my main event into possibly the money. He's been so good.
Yeah. Okay. And then pairing with him, Jordan Walker, obviously highly touted prospect coming into this year, really kind of fell off in a lot of people's minds. But as of recent, he has 6 straight games with a hit, 3 home runs in that span. And his current, as I'm trying to load this, currently 274 average, 14 homers, 6 stolen bases in just under 100 games. Going into next year or for Dynasty, who would you rather have, Jordan Walker or Royce Lewis?
They're actually fairly similar in terms of walk, strikeout rate, max EV, barrel rate. I'm going to take Jordan Walker for the youth and the more intact ligaments. I just have a feeling that he's going to outsteal Royce Lewis going forward. I'm a little surprised that Royce even has 4 this year. But in terms of power, I think Jordan Walker is going to be right there. I think Jordan Walker has more power upside even than Royce Lewis. And because of walk and strikeout rate, I think that their, batting average is going to be pretty similar. So I'm taking Jordan Walker. But Royce Lewis has really opened my eyes. You're supposed to be worse after ACL surgery, and now he's had 2. But he's showing the doubters wrong on that one.
I'm actually surprised that you said that, but in a good way, because I think the recency of what Royce is doing is going to really rocket his. I think Royce is going to go quite a bit higher than Jordan Walker in redraft leagues next year. But I also think that Jordan Walker is a really good offseason buy right now.
Yeah.
Because, under 100 games, if you didn't have this whole story of like him coming up and then getting sent down and then some struggles and whatever, and you were just like, if you were to get, let's say 15 homers and 8 stolen bases in like 110 games, like you wouldn't call that like a huge failure for a prospect. No. It's just the value of who he is coming into the year. He hits the ball really high, lower strikeout rate than Royce, better walk percentage than Royce. And I think he's coming into it.
The shape of his season will also mean that some people will have missed the good months. Some people will have not really checked into him because you don't always, if he's not on your team or
Yeah.
your team was bad and you stop paying attention at some point, like there are people who will have missed that he even had a season this good. They'll have put in their head Jordan Walker was a bust last year or whatever.
And those are the people that also check out early and you can take advantage of. So that would be someone I would buy. As far as current prospects go, wanted to throw this your way. Jasson Dominguez over the weekend, 2 homers. He has hits in all 3 games that he has played, 63% hard hit rate, 18% barrel. He's at 102 on max EV.
It's a 110 in AAA. So
yeah, we've seen the big hard hit. I've been espousing him for quite some time, and when he got called up, I said, "Listen, if you're in a 12-team 5 outfielder, I'm 100% picking him up." I think he hit 3 this weekend. Jasson Dominguez, thoughts on this kind of early? It's obviously very early. One of the things I said, I'd actually be curious what you have to say about this, is that obviously he's like improved his walk rate, the strikeouts are attempting to get better. I thought he could succeed extra here because I don't think there's enough time in the season where you're going to have massive adjustments. Pitchers doing, we see that what's that big adjustment period? Like the 3-week, the 4-week mark of a prospect being up, where there's a lot more of a sample size on these guys. And I think that adjustment period is just not going to really happen. And obviously I just think his tools are through the roof. So I think he had a chance to succeed pretty well in this short period of time. But any takeaways from this, just few games that Jasson's played?
I just remember Ian Kahn saying, this guy's it. And Ian Kahn made some pretty aggressive moves in terms of trading really established names in dynasty leagues for Jasson Dominguez. And I thought, you're crazy, dude. I mean, this is happening in like early 2022 where you're talking about an A-ball kid who's 19 years old or whatever. And I'm like there's a million guys like this, but I think he, there's something he was that he likes, stuff that I can't see as well, which is a sort of demeanor and some of the psychological aspect of how a player plays on the field. And he just saw someone who was dominant and, took over when he played on the field. And that's something I really appreciate about Corbin Carroll, actually, is that I feel like he's trying to be the best player on the field every time he's out there. And that's why I thought his series against Ronald Acuna Jr., including that game where it was 20-18 or whatever it was so compelling to watch because, both those guys wanted to do everything. They wanted to get on base. They wanted to steal base. They wanted to hit homers, and they wanted to be better than the other guy, and I think, there's some aspect to that is important. I don't know that. I think there were probably guys who flame out that wanted to be the best guy on the field too, but there's something about the drive. There's something there that I don't always fully appreciate. And I think Jasson Dominguez, I think he has it with the capital I, you know what I mean? Like, I think he's, I think he might be better than his minor league numbers in some ways. I mean, he's going to a park that augments offense. And he's shown plus plate discipline in the past. So I'm not super worried about the chase rate yet. And he hits the ball super hard and can run real fast. So, I mean, this is a guy who also everybody in New York is kind of looking to, and that might be a great combination of a guy who wanted to be the guy, and New York is looking to him right now to be, rescue our future. And he could just be the starting center fielder next year and hit 250, 260 with 20, 25 homers and 30, 35 steals next year. Like, that's within the range of possibilities.
It'll be fascinating to see where his draft stock is and what it looks like next year, and who's higher, Royce Lewis or Jasson Dominguez or Jordan Walker, between all those guys, where it's going to go. But I agree, he is up for the task, and he's a cool character, man. He's not fazed by a lot, even in the bad results and it points in the minors, and it was able to push through it. Lastly, I just want to throw, speaking of some top prospects that are going out big to end the year. Don't know at this point if we're going to see them. There's always a possibility as the AA down season ends around like the 15th. So these guys could be moved up because AAA ends at the end of the year. But 3 guys to just be paying attention to. Jackson Holiday is actually going up to AAA. He did not get the move up to the majors. To me, kind of also says that he might be an AFL guy because he's going to AAA, not going to the majors. Though at the same point, they might just say like
the plate appearance. He's going to be I bet you he's going to be the AFL because we're talking about 411 plate appearances. They want him in the big leagues next year for 600. So that's what the AFL is often about, is just pushing that plate appearance number, tiring them out. Mike Trout was tired. Bryce Harper was tired. Buster Posey was tired. And it's supposed to be to tire them out to make them feel what like a 600 plate appearance season feels like.
The guys in the final week, they want to leave. I've asked them. Like I remember asking Parker Meadows, and he was just like, "I'm ready to go. I'm ready to go. They're out of here." But like going to AAA, going to the end of September, and if you were to do AFL, that's going to push 500 easy over on the plate appearances. So that looks like that's where that's going. But hitting 333 with a 451 OBP across all 3 levels so far this year is Jackson Holiday.
I wish I had some batted ball data. I just want to know.
You're going to get some.
I want to know what's underneath. Yeah, AAA and AFL has some batted ball data. I just want to know what's underneath that. 174 ISO in IA and 169 in AA. Could go either way. That could be all legs. If it's all legs, then I like him a little bit less. But otherwise he's number 1 prospect in baseball.
He's a freak. Also in AAA, Jordan Lawler, 349 in AAA, 2 homers in August in Reno, and that's like around 40 at bats. And he has 7 hits over his first 2 games in September. This is another one of those guys that, I was surprised that Ambex didn't call it before. He has been hot as can be going up to AAA, PCL, but you might potentially, he's not going to go to the AFL because he played last year. We might get a short run of him.
I think you could see him in the major leagues. I mean,
yeah, that's
right
what I'm
now,
saying.
the D-backs are 3 games out or 2 games out of 3 games out of the wild card race. What do you? I guess this is the use case. The D-backs do well against the Cubs this weekend.
Yeah. And
right, because if they do poorly, then they kind of fall out, and they're like, "Well, what do we want to like? Do we really want to start his clock?"
That's why I think Lawler could come up. I mean, you're only under 100 at bats. I think under 50 at bats so far in AAA, but offensively, you could use it. And I really think you should pay attention to him if you're looking for it. Looking for a little bit of a boost at the back half of the year. But
redraft, he could be in a redraft. Like if he's coming up, he's going to play, and he probably just takes shortstop.
I don't think he's breaking camp next year. And then finally, just want to throw this out. He's in AA. I think this is another AFL candidate. Junior Caminero, since August 1st, has 12 homers, and he's in AA right now. And my friend Chris Clegg tweeted about this. This was a couple days ago, so this might be a little bit old. He had 35 batted balls of over 110 this year, and that would be the 5th most BBEs, including the majors. Only Acuna, Ohtani, Vlad, and Stanton had more. So this is a minor leaguer in AA with an absurd amount of 110 plus hits this year. And a couple of those homers over the last couple of days were of the 110 plus variety. So Junior Caminero is going to be a hot name to pay attention to and has the opportunity to break camp with the team next year. And we might see him in the Arizona Fall League, which a lot of us will be able to get some, hopefully more of that batted ball data. That's it.
Yeah, he's super exciting. I wish he could play shortstop. This year they have played him at shortstop 20 games, but they
might have an opening.
They might have an opening. 53 games at third base for Tampa. So the Fangraphs fielding is 30-50. That's not normally what you see on a possible shortstop. But, with Taylor Walls and Basabe, he could be a guy that plays some shortstop and seeds the way to Basabe or Walls defensively later in games or something. So he also is the kind of guy that I think will just hit his way onto the roster sooner rather than later. I don't know if he'll break camp with the team because the team loves to have like this Luke Raley guy hanging around. They always like have some older guy. They're like, we really want to make room for him on this team. And hey, the proof of the process is good. Luke Raley's been good this year. He's in the running for the rookie of the year at like 28. But you know, I do think he will play like 400 plate appearances in the big leagues next year or something like that.
Yeah. And one thing I would look for is if he does go to the AFL, where do they play him positionally? You know, do they play him a lot of third base, or does he exclusively play shortstop?
Just try to put him shortstop for the whole AFL just to be like, does this work?
Yeah, let's see if it works. That's kind of what that place is for. So there you go. That is the season finale of the Project Prospect, going a little bit over an hour. Eno and myself. Again, we will have nuggets of prospects into every episode. We will be back again tomorrow, but starting next week, it'll go to 2 episodes. So make sure you guys are locked into that, and get yourself an Athletic subscription. Go to athletic.com/ratesandbarrels. And just thanks everybody for hanging out for Project Prospect all year long. It's the reason I got to be here and do the show, was because these guys wanted to talk prospects and you guys listened. So I really appreciate that. Find Eno on Twitter at Eno Saris, or X, whatever. Find me at Is It The Welsh, and we'll be back tomorrow for your regularly scheduled Rates and Barrels. For Eno, I'm Welsh. Goodbye for now, friends.
Thanks for listening.